Through a Scottish Prism, the programme that is unapologetically pro-Scottish independence and anti-Westminster rule. Everything we say here is viewed through a Scottish Prism. Brought to you by Barhead Boy.
Hey, hi folks, welcome back to Through a Scottish Prism. Been a week since we just had a last wee chat. I hope you and yours are well. Been another week where there's been so much happening, and we've got lots to talk about. So we don't run out of time, let me get right through with bringing my panel today. We're joined from down there on the borders with by Yvonne Ridley, my good pal Yvonne. Yvonne, my friend, how are you?
Oh, feisty as ever,
and good.
Really forward, sitting like a coiled spring, ready to go.
Good, excellent. And of course, we've got from Clickman, we've got the world's favourite lawyer, our Eva. Eva, how are you, my friend?
Hi, Roddy. Hi, Yvonne. What a week. Has it only been a week?
Tell me about it. We're going to have a heck of a conversation today, I would imagine.
I certainly hope so.
Right, and then we've got there. Terrible. I don't know where you are, Robin. I've forgotten, but I've got Robin Mcalpine here joining me.
Well,
is it Ayrshire? You're in Ayrshire.
No, Hell's Teeth. No, Lanarkshire. I'm a Lanarkshire boy. Doing in the wild. Doing in the wilds are bigger.
Oh, there you go. I misunderstood. They said he's a bigger of a man.
I'm a bigger man, but no, that's no that.
I misunderstood. Welcome. Thank you, Rob. It's been a while since we've had you back, but you're a busy man. You're a hard man to get hold of.
I've been writing this book for about 3 months, 4 months. So it's been weekends, late nights, the whole bloody thing. It's done. It's finished. So I'm back out my hibernation again.
Well, good. When you get the book out there published, you'll have to come back and tell the folk all about it.
I'd be delighted.
Do that. So anyway, it has, my friends, we're not going to be joined by the soul man, who is unable to be with us tonight. He won't be here next week either, but for the next couple of weeks we won't have our fill. But I suppose we've got to start, Yvonne, at the big one of the week, which was Michael Beale's the new manager of Rangers. No. The big one is that Ian Blackford, of course, has resigned. After telling us 10 days ago he was looking forward to restanding again, Stephen Flynn, who's now the favourite to replace him, telling us, no, it was all rumours and paper talk. He had no intention of running for the leadership. But hey, déjà vu, it's happening. It was a bit of a surprise.
Well, if you go by the Times, he was report on his departure. He was about the last to know that he was going. He was visited by Brendan O'Hara, the Argyll and Bute MP, who apparently tipped him off that there was a young challenger for the throne.
A young Turk.
And to Stephen Flynn. It all sounds very sort of Games of Thrones style. So, really, for me, it was unexpected. But I'm still trying to catch up and keep up with Scottish politics.
Well, that's what you're here, so you better hurry up and catch up quick. Eva, for those of us in the ex-members of that party, I think we know that this did not happen. Stephen didn't suddenly change his mind. Ian didn't just stand down unless she who must be obeyed had so decreed. So did the men in grey kilts arrive at Ian's office and say, your time's up, mate?
Well, isn't it odd that this development took place at exactly the time that the spotlight was on the First Minister in relation to other matters? And she would need something to divert attention away from the very fact that she'd been badly caught out in the context of management of the zero tolerance event, and the woman who had the audacity to protest there and to really voice the concerns of so many thousands of women and men in the country in relation to that bill. So no, it's no coincidence. It's a pivotal moment potentially for the independence movement, though, because if that party elects the right person to lead them, then we could have a conciliatory approach towards independence, and we could perhaps have a more active and determined and driven campaign than we've seen from the SNP in recent years. So my fingers are crossed, but my hopes are not particularly high. The jury's out, but perhaps Robin will know more about what direction the SNP might go in with a change of leadership.
Well, I'm not sure, Robin. You're not really a political party man, but do you think a change of leader at this time, after everything that's happened, will make a huge change to the dynamic?
Oh, well, let me be clear about this. I am not personally a political party man, but that's what I do. I try to find out what's going on and why. I'm a political lobbyist, a political analyst. That's what I do. And I've been trying to make this out. So I've been asking around a little bit, people that have got some sight of what's going on, because there's three reasons that leaders lose their job. It's either a strategic reason. You've become a liability, you're a problem, there's a reason why you're going to cost people elections, jobs. So you get the chop on a purely cynical level. And that's what happened to Boris Johnson. Really, that's what happened to Theresa May. And then you've got ideological. So half your party don't believe in what you believe in, or you're in a faction of the party that another party doesn't like. That's what happened to Corbyn. He got the chop for ideological reasons, but also sometimes you just get personal reasons. Folk don't like you. You just don't carry the personality that keeps a group together. And sometimes a group just says, that's it. We don't buy into you personally as a brand. And you see, I've been trying to work out what's going on here, because in my opinion, Blackford's been a low-level liability for years. None's news happened. The Grady stuff was a real focus on that. But when he was making clumsy, silly statements about pensions, which, I mean, he's left us backwards on the pensions front because he said things that were not properly thought through. So he's actually knocked us back with that. So I don't think it's strategic as far as I can see. And if it's ideological, I can't make it out. I cannot work out what factions there are in there and who's voted for what. I think this is personal. I think this has just been a case of people have lost personal confidence in him. And sadly, that's the version of getting rid of somebody which is least likely to lead to change. Because if it's just the fact that he's not seen as being effective, then what you're getting is you're getting a change of personality, but you're not necessarily getting a change of strategy or a change of ideological or strategic approach. So, and I'll be absolutely honest, when I had to go and look up who Stephen Flynn was, I didn't recognise his name when I'd heard a mention of it. And I mean, maybe he's good, but he's 32 years old. He's been in Parliament for 3 years. He had a short spell leading Aberdeen Council, and that's it. So it could be maybe he's the Wunder Kid, but maybe he's not. And it strikes me as an unusual choice for a party in this dominant position to be picking somebody with that low a profile and that little experience behind their belt. So I don't know. It could be good. But I'm yet to be convinced.
Yeah, I think a lot of it seems some of the decisions are strange. I mean, for example, replacing a Queen's Counsel as she was at the time on Law and Justice with a drama school student. So I wouldn't. Oh no, that was easy to understand. That was pure ideology. That was personality and ideology. Where did it come from? Did it come from Edinburgh or did it come from Westminster?
Or both. Incidentally, both. There was extreme hostility within the Westminster group and a clear desire to marginalise Joanna Cherry from SNP HQ. So that's what I'm saying. In politics, things either make sense or they don't. And the marginalisation of Joanna Cherry makes perfect sense. For me at the moment, what's happened to Blackford makes sense in the sense that I don't think he's been performing very well. But it doesn't make sense in the timing. Why now? And I suspect, and incidentally, I think this is probably the real reason. I think what you're seeing is the massive simmering internal resentments inside the SNP has been suppressed for about 5 years now with the belief that a referendum is round the corner. And I think the cap has come off that now. And I think we're going to see more and more of this. I think we're going to see more and more people saying, I bit my tongue because there was a deadline to keep my mouth shut because I was supposed to be getting this referendum and now I'm not. So I think what you'll find is that this is really a sign that the cap has come off some of the discipline that was being imposed with the belief a referendum was coming.
Yeah, it could be a Yvonne, it could easily be a sop. Maybe Mr. Flynn were underselling. Maybe he's one of the rebels and he's been bought off. But we heard about this a few weeks ago. We got from all our contacts. We heard that there was a move against Ian. That the three amigos in particular were moving the chess pieces to have them removed. There was all this stuff about Grady. A lot of the other members weren't happy. Which was all denied, but this, as I say, suddenly happened. So something has triggered it, and we're all in agreement. We just don't know what it is. Maybe I think I'm siding with Eva. It was to deflect from She Who Must Be Obeyed.
Well, according to the BBC, which of course, as we know, never gets it right when it comes to politics in Scotland. Blackford, he told them that he wasn't pushed, and he denied rumours that he was considering resigning, and further reports of party infighting. I mean, that's what that was back in March, and of course, this lot in Westminster, they're like it's a sack of ferrets. You know, they're not a nice bunch. They've shown that by the way they treat their own colleagues. Anybody watching BBC Parliament will see how they treat the jewel in the crown, who, in my opinion, is Joanna Cherry. You know, she's... and you see them sitting as far away from her as possible while sharing the same bench. Real sort of nursery school politics at play. And it just makes you realise what a nasty bunch of people are sitting there representing Scotland. As I say, just the way that they treat their own. And of course, Blackford should have been onto this and seen that she wasn't treated like this, but he's obviously got no influence on this business. It's toxic. I would imagine actually he's quite relieved to get out of there, because it must be a very highly pressurized job when he has the likes of us watching his every move. I mean, Scottish Prism delighted on showing this special relationship that he had with the Tory, you know, this stroking episode in the House of Commons, you know, was... Well, I found it deeply unpleasant, but it must be very hard being in such a pressurized atmosphere. And then you've got Lady Voldemort on the phone. I think Eva's right. You know, that this was a man-made or a woman-made fire to divert attention from the bloody inferno that's kicking off in Bute House at the moment. Yep. So, but I've heard that he did quite a plum job in Europe, which is interesting, because he must have sown the seeds for, you know, these jobs don't just happen, as Sturgeon knows to her own cost. And the odd thing that he did say was that he would he'd been asked by Sturgeon to be some sort of her personal business ambassador. So that's all a bit odd. And as I say, this is what's in the BBC report, where he said it was time for fresh leadership after 5 years in the role.
Well, it was only 10 days ago he was telling us he wasn't leaving. But, you know, you're talking about it's a high-pressure job. there, Eva. Doing what? They're certainly not high pressure working on independence, because at the same time, as Yvonne's talked about nursery school behaviour, Neil Hanvey brought in an early day motion to demand a Scottish independence referendum, as the Scottish people had asked for. SNP policy. And when he turns up to do it in the Westminster Hall, he's of course supported by Kenny from the Alba Party, Angus Brendan McNeill, and all the other SNP MPs were too busy to come and debate in the, as I put it in my blog, in the belly of the beast, the Scottish democratic will. That, if it sends the wrong message all the time, because we're saying to Westminster, well, we don't really care, so you don't need to care.
Well, quite frankly, the Tories in particular will be laughing all the way to the bank at the moment, given the utter lack of unity that there is within the independence movement at a leadership level. Grassroots is different. I spoke at the Stirling event following the Supreme Court decision. There was a fellow from the Greens who spoke, I spoke, nobody from the SNP spoke, although there were 5 SNP councillors in the audience, including a council leader who's also employed by an MSP who's a government minister, and a provost of a local authority here. Neither of them had the gumption to get up and speak to what was actually a fairly small audience, but an audience who were all on side in relation to being A, independent supporters, and B, seeking unity. I know that there were obviously events elsewhere around the country arranged primarily by or on behalf of Lesley Riddoch, and there were speakers from all party and no party. That's all good and well, but that was one event on one evening. It's nowhere near good enough for a movement that's supposed to be trying to liberate a country. So I would rather hope that if there is going to be somebody dynamic at the helm of the leadership of the SNP in Westminster, that their attitude becomes one where they look at what's best for the country, not what's best for the party. Now, that's usually a forlorn hope in the context of all political parties, but it should not be the case with the SNP, because their very essence, their very raison d'etre is the independence of Scotland. It's a principle that goes way beyond whether you're left, right, socialist, social democrat, whatever you are. It's something that's an overriding feature and a factor that made our independence movement something that was supposed to be principled and a real, very, very dear value. So if the new leader continues to put party before country and puts politics before principle, then Scotland will remain in a dark place for a very long time. And that's just what people don't want. Because what you see and you hear on the streets daily is, when is there going to be action? We've got the Alba conference next weekend. If it wasn't for Alba doing these kind of events, like that National Assembly, like the Wee Alba book tour, I mean, I think there's been 41 Wee Alba book events this year. You know, that's a lot of ground that Alec and others have covered. The SNP should have been doing these things. They should have been arranging these events to take place on a cross-party, no-party basis. Instead, what you've had is the embarrassment of the constant jibes about where's the missing 600 grand. And instead of the SNP really trying to gather money through their yes.scot alter ego, they've got Believe in Scotland doing a fundraiser instead. It's just another arm of the SNP. People understand that. They know that that's the case. And we don't want to be embarrassed and ashamed anymore. We need a movement that's A, united, and B, dynamic. You know, I know that Robin and his colleagues, for an instance, have been quite rightly very critical of the Scottish Government in many respects, most recently perhaps in relation to the National Care Review and the care system. There are experts, Robin and others, who could give the Scottish Government very substantial advice about where they're going wrong in that regard. There are other experts who would tell them where they're going wrong in the NHS, in the management of the education system, etc. And all these people in their advice are being swatted aside. They're not listening. And, you know, Miss Sturgeon has to learn to listen to people who know what they're talking about, avert the dangers that lie ahead if she carries on the way that she's going, and try and get us back on the track that we used to be on before she diverted us away up a cul-de-sac with us, you know, just another mandate, just another mandate, just another mandate. We're sick of it and we need to see change ASAP. So hopefully this change of leadership will give us that. If it doesn't, God knows where the hell we'll end up.
Can I offer a slightly more depressing take than that? But
Jesus, if you must.
But only in the short term, right? So there's just a couple of points here. So first of all, I think everybody has to start to refocus their head on the idea of drowning, not waving. So when you're saying that this was set up by Sturgeon to distract from her problems, this is still, I think, feeding into the kind of myth that she's currently strategically on top of things. And I'll just very quickly tell you why I think that's not the case. So I, for those that don't know, I was a political strategist. That's kind of what I did. With that Supreme Court result, which everybody knew was coming, there are 3 non-negotiable things I would have been saying to any leader as that was approaching. Number 1, you need 3 tested, carefully looked at responses depending on which of the 3 answers come out. Do not stand up on a stage and wing it on the spot saying prisoners without having checked that that's going to carry the rest of your group, the rest of your party. And it's clear that they didn't do that. Second of all, once you've got that line, drill it. Every single person from your party that's anywhere near a microphone, make sure they understand the line precisely. No winging it, no improvising, drill it. And that's non-negotiable 2. Non-negotiable 3 is control the narrative. So I would have said, number 1, there's not much you can do about the day after. So the Thursday press, it happens on the Wednesday. None much you can do about the Thursday press. That's what it is. It's your job to control the Friday press. So you need to set something up. And much more to the point, the Sunday papers, particularly the Sunday National, you need to set up something to keep control of the narrative. And I looked at the Sunday National last weekend and I went, what the fuck? There's nothing in this. They've run away. And I'm telling you, it's not just me saying this. If you were to pick 3 political strategists, 100 political strategists from anywhere on the planet, they would tell you what I've just told you. Prepare your line, drill your team, control the narrative every time. And it looks to me like they got a result and they went, oh my God, what are we going to do? Quickly lock the doors, switch the email off, let's drink heavily. I don't know. So if you think that chaos at Westminster distracts from chaos at Holyrood, you don't. If Sturgeon wanted a distraction, she wouldn't. What happened was that she protected Blackford 2 weeks ago. And what we're seeing now is she can't protect him anymore. I don't believe she wanted him gone. He's tame. Anyone else is more of a risk. So this is what I'm trying to say. It's drowning, not waving. And this question of can we fix this with the pieces on the board roughly as they are just now? That's what I don't think. Because Blackford never had any say over anything. The idea that Blackford was in the circle of trust is nonsense. Blackford was just outside the circle of trust, getting told what to say. And that'll be the case again. And this idea that if only the First Minister could listen. Yeah, absolutely. If only Boris Johnson could control his hair. If only Theresa May could have been authoritative. If only Jeremy Corbyn could have had support of the British establishment. None of these things are going to happen. And my problem at the moment is that, again, my experience of the movement is the divisions are not quite what they look like. Most people would bite your hand off for one thing to unite behind. And my problem is the events of the last 3 years have more or less destroyed all of the, what I would call, authority centres in the independence movement. The movement itself has been undermined. Its leaders have been undermined. The political parties around about it are rats in a sack. And the problem is that, I mean, the positive is I think there's an overwhelming desire to get this shit together again by almost everybody. Almost everybody. Unless you are hardcore on one side or other of various the fights, for example, it's not the only one, but for example, on Gender Reform Act. Unless you're a hardcore on one or other side, most people are looking for some compromise into the middle. That's not being blocked by the grassroots. It's not even being blocked by the Westminster group, the Holyrood group. It's not being blocked by the movement or Alba. It's not even being blocked by the Greens on the whole. It's being blocked from the top. And that's my problem. Can this be pulled round quickly? How? The barrier that's preventing the pulling together of the independence movement cannot be there if we're going to pull together. Where is that barrier coming from? The top. That's that. I've been watching this for years now. It's been my fundamental analysis since 2016. It hasn't changed unless we can produce a collegiate movement, which is not a pyramid, which is not hierarchical. Unless we can create a collaborative, collegiate movement, we can't solve these problems. And this movement has absorbed the culture of its top. And unless we address that, I don't think we can deal with this quickly. And this is why, I might be veering on to future subjects, but this is why I'm nervous with everybody getting on board with this idea of plebiscite elections, because that gives us nothing more than 2 more years to keep running after this daft bandwagon before we realise that the fundamental problem isn't how we get people in polling stations. The fundamental problem is the nature of the independence movement and what it's doing. And so this is why I keep saying, let's clean our house now before we start coming up with new schemes for what we do next. That's how I'm feeling. And if we say, right, look, let's give this another 2 years and have one more roll of the dice, all that's going to happen is we'll be sitting here in 2 years having this conversation again. And that's another 2 years doing this money. So that's my view on this subject. It's a fundamental social problem.
I'll confirm it for you, because there's 2 things I would say on that. One, you're saying they didn't have a clue and they weren't ready. Obviously, that's why they've pushed the conference on what will we do till the first quarter of next year. The other thing I'll tell you, there is another political party I can tell you about that pre-judgment, called their NEC and gamed all the outcomes, sorted the messages and sorted out who the messengers were to be. Someone who, a party led by someone who actually knows what they're doing without making an advert, but I think you all know who I'm talking about. Yvonne, Robin's opened some real great points here. I mean, we don't have Angry Phil today, but if I just said Growth Commission to Robin, he would have really gone. But he's right. There doesn't seem to be any plan, anyone knowing what they're doing there. And they're right. Rod starts at the top of the barrel, not at the bottom, as far as I'm concerned. You're on mute. You're muted, Yvonne.
Which is double bad for audio listeners.
Yeah.
What I was saying is I felt like ringing my doctor to order a load of Prozac after listening to Robin's analysis. And the depressing truth is, he's right. There'll be a lot of spats there listening to this who will be on a shoogly peg and just thinking, they'll probably record this and make notes, Robin, and go bounding into the office on Monday saying, right, there are 3 things that we have to do. Because it's you mentioned they've got 2 years. I don't even think they've got that. But I am intrigued that Blackford said he would continue his role as MP for Ross Skye and Lochaber, and that he's still insisting that he hasn't been pushed. And he said to the BBC, the First Minister has asked me to take on a role as her business ambassador. I'm absolutely delighted to have the opportunity to take on the engagement with the business community. In order to do that, it's right that I stand down as the SNP Westminster leader. So, do people think that we're really stupid? Of course he was pushed.
People do, actually. Yes, they do.
Well, I like to think that our listeners have got more off than most people. And of course he was pushed or hounded out of a job. We've seen how vicious that lot in Westminster can be, how they put themselves before politics, and politics is the last thing on their mind. I'm still thinking of that disgraceful walkout by the SNP when Neil Hanvey got up to, no, it was Kenny McCaskill got up to talk about energy, the energy crisis in Scotland. Of all the things that they should have sat down and listened to was that speech. And of course, they've backpedaled ever since Prism made a big deal of it. And said, oh, no, it wasn't that at all. Well, yes, it was that. It was, I wouldn't want Blackford's job keeping that lot in line. They're toxic. There's no sisterhood there. As I say, when you look at the way that Joanna Cherry is treated, it's disgusting. And the odd thing is, Roddy, she would be ideal leadership material. She's got universal respect within Westminster because of her legal knowledge. She's well ahead of the curve, and she has been proved right time and time again on Sturgeon's barking mad gender recognition act. Joanna Cherry would be, for me, the obvious choice. But of course, we all know that we've got, I keep thinking about the Pope. But anyway, no, it's not going to happen, is it?
No, I'm sure it wouldn't be my choice. But apart from that, but she's been damaged so much with false accusations and everything else that she's just, it would never fly. But Eva, going on to what something that Robin was talking about how they didn't know what they're doing. One, as I've mentioned, that they've pushed their spring special conference to come up with a plan for the outcome of the Supreme Court to March next year. But the other one was that I noticed that every one of the people that was questioned, all the spokesmen, were all given a different message about plebiscite, etc., etc. And Keith Brown, I mean, it can only be described as a car crash, your local MSP, ruled out a Holyrood plebiscite immediately because we've got a cost of living crisis and we can't afford to have an election for independence because there's a UK cost of living crisis. Can someone explain that to me as a Scottish nationalist?
Appalling, absolutely appalling. That interview I watched, and I think, I've still got the bruises on my chin for the number of times it bounced off the floor. One of the things that he said was, very tellingly, you need a 2/3 majority, a supermajority, before you can have a Holyrood election, for example. That's the very thing that they were told about last year when Alba launched. That was the very point. SNP 1, Alba 2, SNP for the constituency, Alba on the list. And had they done that, there would have been, had the SNP got behind that proposal, there would have been a 2/3 majority and we could have done a lot more with it than seems to have been possible in the course of the last 18 months or so. He went on, though, to say, as you've said, that there's a cost of living crisis and we're coming up to a hard winter and what have you. All the things that we didn't have to be facing so starkly had we already been independent. But instead of that, what we had was advice to the English where we were trying to stop the Brexit that the English people had voted for. We had that on the side of a bus until we were sick, fed up looking at it. We've had innumerable excuses from the SNP for why they've not done anything, and this is just another one. This is just Keith Brown keeping me selling a job for another couple of years. It's not good enough, but as Robin says, there are problems with a plebiscite, and there would be problems with a plebiscite with the current SNP leadership, because of course they'll likely, once they make their minds up, not want it to be a Scotland United platform anyway. Although clearly there are issues between various government ministers about whether it would be a Scotland United or whether it would be SNP votes only that would be favoured. So I don't think they really know if they're coming or going. I'd be embarrassed to be Keith Brown these days and the kind of guff that he's sent out to use as excuses within the media. But I suppose the overriding factor is that probably most of the population of Scotland now wonder whether the SNP actually want independence at all, because there's been so many whispers about one more push, one more mandate, and some concerns that what they really want is Devomax, that if there's a Labour government, there might be a sellout, insofar as they might do some sort of deal with Labour to get, what was promised in the vow, for example. But where the SNP have taken their eye off the ball badly is in relation to Labour support, because there are slight indications that the Labour vote here and there in Scotland is actually a bit better than the SNP would want it to be. And they need to do something about that. The sensible thing, which they wouldn't do, is to get together with Alba. What they'll do instead is they'll watch as the Labour vote slowly creeps up here and there. Labour held won the by-election in Broxburn the other day. Their vote was up by something like 10%. Now, it was a low turnout. I think it was around about 30%. The by-election just before that in Glasgow Lynn, the turnout was 27%. Those figures say it all in the context of how all politicians are failing to set the heather alight. The public are bored, they're sick, fed up, and they need things to happen, and they don't think it's going to happen by exercising their power at the ballot box. And everybody needs to do something about that. The system's not working.
The Broxburn, when the Tories were down 10, Labour were up 10, and the SNP were down 6.5. Now, I think a lot of that is just what you've alluded to, is to what happened to the SNP in 2017. That our vote turns out for independence. There are people who don't, never voted in their life. They only voted in 2014. Our base, when I say ours, I mean the independence movement, is only, they know you vote for a councillor, you're not getting independence. They're not enthused by it. Robin, on that, and also back in January 2020, when after the 2019 election, and Nicola told us in 2020, pre-COVID, we weren't going to get a referendum, and we were getting dragged out of the European Union. She did make a great promise, and we've banged on about it here, especially myself and Eva here, the Scottish Constitutional Convention. Now, you alluded in one of your questions earlier, you think there's problems with plebiscite. Do you think we need to get a constitutional convention and come up with a consensus of action, and using the best brains, including Civic Scotland, trade union movement, political leaders? Is that the way forward?
Right. Okay. So I was writing about this the other day. I'm bruised, shall we say, because for the last 8 years, I've said over and over, stop worrying about referendums, right? Referendums are the button you press once you've won. If you're on top of things, a referendum is just the button you press to convert all your work into success. And there was this argument that we can't do anything until there's a referendum. And that's just measurably untrue. And I keep saying this. If that was true, there's only 3 social attitudes that would have changed in Britain in the last 30 years. Most changes of public opinion do not require a referendum. Right. And I keep saying this. I know it's boring, but it's true. If you go and you look at the voting population, there are 10% we can absolutely, undoubtedly win over, and another 5% we could win over, and another 5% after that, which are a bit more of a long shot, but we can maybe get. So if you want to win, there's only one version of it, which is what does it take to get those 10% over? What those 10% are saying to us, because we did a lot of public attitude research work with this was with the Independence Convention. What they are saying to us is we like the positive pitch. Importantly, we want to believe that Scotland can be an independent country. We like the idea of Scotland being an independent country. We like the things we heard in 2014. Our problem is when we look deep into your eyes, we don't think you know how to deliver. We don't think you've done enough work. The purpose of the Constitutional Convention, I actually said call it, I'm not a fan of rehashing old names. So I was suggesting we should call it the National Commission for an Independent Scotland. Just call it the National Commission. Get respected figures on there to address the issues which wavering voters are telling us they want addressed. Now, the reason that you put august figures on isn't because they're cleverer than the rest of us. It's because we need to create some sense of authority and some sense of solidity that when folk look up and they say, who did this plan? And they look at a folk around the table, they went, right, okay, I've got confidence in that. So it's part of what we've got to do. We've got to, I'm really frustrated with this. I know this is a controversial view, but I can promise you it's true. In the last 8 years, we haven't engaged with the 10% wavering voters. and I know this because we did the research. Actually, let me tell you this because I don't know if everyone knows this. We held 6 focus groups, 8 people each focus group, 1 in Hawick, 2 Edinburgh, 2 Glasgow, 1 in Inverness. And each one went for an hour and a half. And the facilitator, it was professionally done by one of the universities. The facilitator wasn't intervening too much, but did ask, so what have you seen of an ongoing independence campaign? Now, this was in late 2017. And in 6 groups, 8 people per group, not one person was aware that there was an ongoing independence campaign. Now, I should warn you, these were selected as soft no, soft yes, and undecided. These are not hostile. These are people who were close to us. And the facilitator was amazed by this and said, I have a think. Are you sure you're not aware of a campaign? And I'm not. This is really true. One person in one group said, wait a minute. A couple of months ago, I got caught in a traffic jam, and about 2 blocks ahead, I saw some flags going past. Could that have been something? That was the highest level of awareness of an ongoing independence campaign that we found among sympathetic voters. We've been standing at the side of streets and street stalls. We've been going to our own public meetings. We've been arguing. No offence to everybody on here, there's quite a lot of bloggers here, but we've all been sitting in blog wars between ourselves, watching podcasts that only we watch, scheming, coming up with all these ideas. We've done everything apart from try to talk to the bloody target voters. So the 2 things that, in my opinion, the 2 things that we've got to do is create an authoritative case that wins over wavering voters and start a process of effective engagement with them. If we don't start coming up with a plan for talking to them, they're not going to change their mind. And we thought that we could do this simply by politicians barking slogans over the telly. And that's not how it works. It's not how people change their minds. It's not how this works in politics. So these are our 2 core tasks. We've got to, first of all, have something to say. What have we got to say? The same shit we've been saying for 8 years. Basically, it's the same shit we were saying in 2014, except for they've dropped all the interesting bits. Now it's just, if you actually, I know this is, see if you boil down messages. This is what I really do. Campaign messaging is really my main thing. And it's always useful to say, right, what does this message actually say? Boil it down to its simplest measure. And what our current main message is specifically, and I'm going to boil it down to its most, which is give Nicola Sturgeon all the power. Right, so it's what I'm going to give you a second to explain that. Right, so if you listen to what our message is, Tories are bad. Scotland can't decide for itself. The Scottish government should recover all these powers. That is the totality, start and end of our story. Right, it's a democratic story, but if you boil it down to what does that mean? What that means is that Nicola Sturgeon, a very dominant First Minister, should be given more power. Right, now this is why I say underneath the words, you've got to work out what the meaning is. This is a thing I do whenever I'm training folk in strategy. What you say does not matter. What's key is what they hear. And so if you're saying Tories are bad, give us all the power, who are us? Us is Nicola Sturgeon. Nobody knows who's in the bloody cabinet apart from her. And so that's what we've been doing for 8 years, is give me all the power and I'll stop Brexit. Give me all the power and I'll make things a little bit better. Give me all the power and I'll stop doing the crazy things that Tories do. And that's all we've been saying over and over for 8 years. We don't use those words, but that's what people hear. That's the meaning of what we've been saying. And I can only tell you this. This is, I'm sorry if I'm being a bit boring here, but this is just global political strategy theory just now. The only thing that's changing anyone's mind anywhere in the world just now is either cultural, so that's the Twitter, Facebook, kick folks' fury off and force them to be more and more furious and polarize them that way. That's very bad for us, by the way. Polarization doesn't work for us. The other side, as you should spot, has been permanently trying to play up polarization. We should be trying to play it down. And the other thing that changes people's minds is to talk about something in relation to their lives as they are lived, not collectively, not as a group of 1,000, not as a group of 1,000,000, as a group of 1. What does this mean to you in your life as you are living it now? And this is often not what people think it is. And so I keep saying, people keep thinking it's things like pride in your country, or it's about fear of financial markets. It's not. It's about public services. It goes right down to parking places. You try to drop your wains off at the school, and every day there's no parking places. Why? These are the things which people feel every day. Why are the schools where there's no parking? Why have we organised things this way? How does independence make this better? What can we do better? What can we do with our infrastructure better? What can we do with our public transport better that make these problems go away? What is the point of this? So if we keep rattling on about these abstract democratic concepts that Tories are bad and the Scottish Parliament may be imperfect, but it's better, therefore give it the power and don't think about it too much, we're not going to win them over, because that doesn't win anybody over. So unless we start talking to people, you know what it is? We don't give a damn about our target voters right now. We're self-pleasing. That's what we're doing. We're self-pleasing. We're doing all the things that we like doing, and we're not stopping to take 5 minutes to say, we're supposed to win this on the basis of public support. Who is it we need to get the public support from? Let's take a moment to stop and consider, what do they want? Take some interest in your target. We're like a supermarket that hates its customers. We're like a supermarket that does its own advertising for its own staff. Tesco, a brilliant place to work. Tesco, every extra 5 minutes on your tea break counts. That's what we're doing. We're not even talking to our target market. And if we don't talk to our target market, if we treat them like they're not all that important to us, that they'll absorb that and they'll wander off and they'll go out shopping or they'll make the swim.
Surely, Robert, but is that not just exactly what the Wee Alba book tour has been doing?
Well,
it's been taking these policies, which I believe you were involved in with Sue Campbell, and they've been taking them around the country and engaging with the public. But we need the SNP and the entire Yes movement doing that. Is that what you're saying? Everyone has to be doing that.
Yeah, but let's try and do it in other ways. I'll come invite me back sometime, and I'll maybe tell you a wee bit more about how they do it in modern political strategy. Because as much what you right, okay. Here's how you win in modern politics. If you're talking down to somebody or you're broadcasting that stuff to somebody, you're already losing, because folk didn't really right now. People are not like getting told what to do. They're not like getting barked at. They're not like getting talked at from a stage, right? How you really win this is what I call seeding conversations into the real world. You win this when three folk ruin their water cooler at work. Do you still get water coolers at work? I don't know. I've not been in an office for that long. Three folk ruin their office cooler at work. Say, how come London takes so much of Britain's wealth? Right? Not when I'm saying it, not when we're saying it, not when some politician after telly's saying it. You're winning when they're saying it, when they're talking about it, round it in there at the school gates, at the bowling club, at the amateur dramatics, wherever these people are, whatever people are, when they're talking about what you want them to be talking about, where they're together. And the way that we've got, and here's the other thing. Oh, sorry, I didn't mean to go on a giant rant, but I'll just finish this off. See that 10%? Here's the fascinating thing about them. You know what they look like? They look exactly like our voters. This is what drives me up the wall. We all talk about this extra 10% like they're an alien species, so we need to go and find them in the wild. If you look at the profile of them, they look exactly like soft yes voters. They don't look quite so much like really committed nationalists, but they definitely don't look like no voters at all. They look like soft no voters. Right? They look like soft yes voters who couldn't get across the road quite. They liked what they saw across the road. They saw our party. They thought, that's quite good. I'd quite like to be over there. They didn't have the confidence to put their fancy clothes off, cross the road, come at the party. We've got to give them that confidence, right? And if you profile them, you know what they look like? They look exactly like us. They are just our pals who didn't quite make it across the road. So where do we find them? You find them in your world. You find them wherever you are. And we've got to learn how to talk to them. And we're not good at it. We're bark, we berate, we shout. All we've got to say is when someone next says to you, bloody hell, I couldn't get an operating waiting list. Yeah, the UK's internal market's absolutely terrible. We could fix that if we became independent, and then get out. Right, stop.
What I find is difficult to take, I don't believe there's any 10%. I've got to be honest. Mm-hmm. Anyone who, after the 10 years of Tory government, who has seen the austerity, the handling of COVID, Brexit, and the fallout from that, and from the cutting of benefits and the abomination of the energy crisis, allowing when we produce so much non-gas electricity and energy. if they're still voting for the union, they're never going to change. They
They're
don't
not,
look
though.
exactly like me.
But they're not voting for the union. They just haven't changed their mind. This is another, again, I'm sorry again, I didn't mean to take it down this rabbit hole, but the other thing is people don't change their mind until you give them a reason to. I wrote about this the other day. There's another thing that we've got to do.
You're right, you need a campaign to do that. Now,
Aye, absolutely.
And
You just don't need a referendum.
But it comes back to one of your earlier point. The rot starts at the top of the barrel. And if the SNP is the dominant force who have not campaigned it, ISP have been trying to campaign, the Yes movement, now all under one banner, ALAPA, they've all been trying, but without the big beast of the movement, we're going nowhere.
No, I know, absolutely. And this is my point. All my scars are because I wanted to create one civic, by the way, politicians are the worst people to go and talk to folk. Folk are very suspicious of politics now. I wanted to create one civic organisation that represented the whole of the independence movement, which could talk to ordinary people with an ordinary voice, not as politicians, but as a civic organisation for that precise reason. A professional campaigning civic organisation that was designed to go and talk to people. And I say it again, you think everyone else is supposed to infer by themselves that the fact that Boris Johnson was mad and Liz Truss is off her head, that their solution is independence. But here's the point. We didn't actually explain to them why that was. Apart from saying we aren't Tories, nobody said, and this is what drives me up the wall, no one said, here's why the Sterling crash happened, here's how Scotland would do it differently. So we keep assuming we want them to do all the work. We want to sit in our living rooms with our feet up by the fire, watching Westminster melt down and expecting our target voters to do all the work, to put all the pieces together. We didn't say there's a sterling crisis because London drives the UK economy. London's massively overvalued and there's no remaining productive investment there.
Who's we, Robin? Who's we? The we you keep referring to?
Independence movement. This is, if you want
the independence movement, as I've highlighted, the independence movement has done all they can.
And this is where I absolutely agree with you. For us to pull together, we've got to have a leadership that doesn't want to be in complete control, 100%. That's my argument. And if you've got a leadership that isn't in complete control, or you had a leadership who was primarily interested in independence, they would realise that this is the best way to win over undecided voters, which is don't do it through politicians on the telly firing slogans. This is my whole argument. We've got to do this in the ways that really work just now. And this is talking to people in their own voice, not in political language, in their own voice. Oh, listen, I need to run. I've just noticed the time. I'm going to get shot here because I've got to be in Glasgow by 12 and I'm an hour away and that's 11:05. I'm going to be late. I'm going to get my bum kicked. But seriously, I'm happy to come back and talk about this anytime because it's not, none of this is rocket science. It's just go and have a look anywhere. Joe Biden's ideas are massively more popular than Joe Biden.
God help us.
You know, this is I know, but this is the point. The idea that politicians are the thing that persuades people the most now is measurably untrue. It's not the way that you do things. We are now, as a society, we are, I don't know how to put this, we're negotiating it between ourselves. We all stand around. This is how we're forming our opinions. We're standing around with people that are like us, people that we like, and we're chatting over these issues. And it's almost like we're negotiating our position between ourselves because we're suspicious of what politicians say because of the number of promises and lies that we've had from all the politicians. So we are moving together. We're moving each other. And here's part of the point. We keep thinking that before we talk to our neighbour, we've got to go all the way up to a TV station and all the way back down again. It's not. You just talk to your neighbour. That's how we do it. But if we're going to do this effectively, people need to be trained in how to do it. And I can only say this again. Go and have a look at anybody that's been successful. Go and have a look at what's happening in Iran. Go and have a look at what's at the Black Lives Matter America. Go and have a look at how the Democrats won the state in Georgia. They trained activists to go out and speak in normal voices to normal people with clear, simple, planned messages to persuade them that there was a reason why they should do this, and the reason why they should do this is it would make their life better, and that's who's winning. Unless you own all the newspapers, Poland, that's how people are winning.
We're all agreeing here, Robin, but we're saying the people who need to do that are not doing it. The people trying to do it.
Right. No, the people who can block it have got to stop blocking the people that are trying to do it.
Yeah.
That's the point. I say this again. If I'm honest with you, looking back, I've never really admitted this, but if I look back, by far the worst thing in my life over the last 8 years has been independence, by miles. When we're doing positive policy work in Commonweal, everybody loves it. We engage with people. It's all positive. I have been fighting for 8 years for the need to have a civic-led independence movement, but not because I hate politicians, but because I know that this is what works. And I've argued for it and argued for it. And for 8 years, I've been told, I don't disagree with you, Robin, but there's going to be a referendum in 18 months. So we haven't got time to do it. We just need to trust Nicola. That's got to stop now. There is nobody. I say this. This is the funny thing. Just before I walk out the door, I'm going to get shot. See, after India Ref, I was invited down to London a lot. I was down talking to the London left about the lessons from India Ref and what we've got to do. And I made a speech to them. I don't know. I was about 5 times at events, and it was always the same. We are on a desert island. We are stuck here. We are on our own. No one is coming to rescue us. There's no point in us heading down to the beach and lighting a signal fire, sitting round and hoping the boats come. We are on our own. No one is coming to save us. No one is coming to our rescue. If we do not put this together as a movement and make it work, it will not just happen. No one above us has a clue. They do not have a plan. They are not leading us anywhere until we realize that the independence movement has no fairy godmother. It has us, it has the labour in our hands, it has the determination to get things done, and it has a wide pool of knowledge and talent to draw on. That's it. That's what we've got. There is no magical genius coming to save us. We have to get a grip on this cause now, or it will drift away from us. Nobody is coming to save us. Right, but I'm going to. Someone is coming to kick my arse.
On that positive note, thank you for joining us, Robin.
Brilliant. Anytime. Good to see you all.
Good. I'll leave Techie to take you out of the room so you can get out.
Yeah.
I love listening.
Well, we're nearly run out of time, and there's so many things I want to go on with, Yvonne. But one thing I really want to quickly cover, all the reasons we know we need to get out for independence. And I would just say on what Robin said, I mean, I don't know what more the non-SNP people can do than they're doing.
Well, as he said, it's not rocket science. No. But I do think that the SNP at the moment is right at a crossroads. I think it's coming apart at the seams. The departure of Ian Blackford, who was telling the Scottish media only last week, no, I'm staying, I'm here, I'm going to be re-elected. And then, on Tuesday, we're going to find that there's a new leader who will then go straight into PMQs on the Wednesday. The SNP, the smell of panic and fear, I think, will be drifting out of Bute House in the next... The game's up for Nicola Sturgeon. She is going to have to go.
Dead woman walking.
Well, she is. She's a lame duck FM. And... unfortunately,
I'm sure the faithful would not accept that.
Well, no, and that's part of the problem. The faithful, they're like this blind loyalty does no one any favours.
Mm-hmm. I mean, we're no lovers of the Tory party on here, Yvonne, but we know even with Thatcher, the goddess Thatcher, that the Tory grey suits looked and went, she's by herself by day. And they went in and took care of it. We need the men in grey kilts to step forward.
The last to know.
Yeah, and that's the way it should be. The Tories at least know how to assassinate you properly.
And Nicola Sturgeon is, I think that the truth will dawn on her this weekend after she reads all the analysis that our SPADs have hidden from her for weeks. And God help her, but if she is one of our Prism listeners, one of the growing army of Prism listeners, then, you know, I would just say to her, the sign is there, it's on the wall, it's time for you to go. Every idea, and there've been far too few that she's ever had, are now knocked out of, you know, then they're falling apart as well.
Yeah.
Her ideas, she's bereft of them. The party is falling apart at the seams. The toxicity, the swamp that is in Westminster has claimed the political life of Ian Blackford, and he's going to go off into the sunset to be her business ambassador.
Whatever that means.
Whatever that means. When somebody calls you an ambassador, it's like having brackets in your job title. You know, it's meaninless, and it's the final stage before you're out of the door.
That's like
so
a podcast host, same thing.
I think it's, you know, we will be reconvening quite soon in an emergency Prism.
Yeah,
and it won't be because the Westminster leader is resigning. It's because the First Minister is on our way out.
Well, in that case, it'll be party hats and streamers and for that meeting. Eva, well, I think
I wouldn't celebrate, Roddy, because
I would.
The precariousness of so many people are counting on Nicola Sturgeon.
Well, they're mistaken.
Party faithful, those who want independence.
Yeah, well, I'm sure, you know, no, I better not say it. I get in trouble for saying that. But no, I'll be glad to see the back of her, because she's done nothing but destroy the most fantastic political movement that ever was in this country. Yeah. She destroyed a party that had at one point the largest membership in Europe of all democratic political party, and she destroyed it. There's no ifs, so's, buts and ands about that. Eva, I think Yvonne's been too kind when she says she's now bereft of ideas. That's the problem. She never had any bloody ideas. She never come up with anything. We're on our uppers because of her.
And don't mention the baby box.
What we need to remember is that the reason why the SNP ended up welcoming devolution was we were going to try and get into power there, make devolution work by running a government competently and improving the day-to-day lives of the people of Scotland as an SNP government. And once we were able to do that, we were able to prove that actually Scotland was perfectly capable of running its own affairs better than those were run by or from Westminster. So Robin's right when he says we need to speak to people in the language that they understand, and we need to listen to what people want. And that is exactly what Alba have been trying to do with the Wee Alba book and related events. We speak to people about the cost of living crisis. We speak about the fuel crisis. And everybody in Scotland understands that had we our own national energy company, we wouldn't have a fuel crisis. There's, you know, it is a political creation, if you like. Everybody in Scotland also understands, and they know perfectly well, that we've got a cost of living crisis because wages in the main are too low and expenditure is too high. And again, that's because of a lack of political will. But the greatest lack of political will is in the context of Nicola Sturgeon and those around her, one of whom will replace her, in sitting on their hands when they should have been, as Robin has so succinctly put it, campaigning for independence over the course of the last 8 years. Instead of that, we've had what we always call the dangling of carrots. Yeah. And the problem now is the carrot cupboard's empty. There's nothing left. The carrots are all gone. There's nothing left for her to dangle. So she's run out of ideas and she's run out of road. But like Thatcher, she refuses to accept that position. Where she's in hot water now, though, really is with the Gender Recognition Reform Bill, because the man that she doesn't like to listen to, she's going to have to listen to him today. Roddy Dunlop, KC, has tweeted about the numbers of inmates in English and Welsh prisons who are transgender. We now know, as the result of research done in part by Kenny McCaskill, that in England and Wales, 4 out of 10 transgender criminals are guilty of sex crimes. So Roddy Dunlop's take on this, which is perfectly accurate, he says that's a misleading headline. One rather suspects that many or all of these individuals are not actually trans, but are pretending to be trans. This is the very thing the First Minister acknowledges now does happen, but which is apparently to be discounted. And he says, Russell Finlay, who's obviously Tory MSP, ask again, because Russell Finlay obviously has tried to get an amendment in relation to preventing sex offenders being able to get a GRC. So this is a major embarrassment for any First Minister who actually wants to listen to a leading lawyer as opposed to opine herself on what the law is or what the law should be. She should take heed of Roddy Dunlop and she should put that bill on hold right now. If she doesn't do that, it will lead to her downfall. It certainly will, because it will be very bad law. And if you've got one of the most eminent KCs in the country saying it's bad law, then it's only heading one way. This country can't afford yet another expensive court action as the result of the unpardonable folly of this First Minister. She's out of control, she's out of road, and if she carries on the way she's going, she'll be the ruination of the hopes of the independence movement.
Yeah, I think the flaw in your argument there is the one she needs to listen, not her best trait. But before I go, just to give some people, because there's been quite a lot of heavy duty stuff, but I'm beginning to think that Sunak's come round, Rishi Sunak's come round to our way of thinking, because he made a speech this week saying how important it is that the people should see their self-determination and the democracy that they choose. There should be justice and the people should be allowed to choose their form of government. Oh, sorry, in Ukraine. Sorry, it wasn't for Scotland. It was in Ukraine. Not for viewers in Scotland, so just forget that. Anyway, look, we're overshot the mark. We've got about 7 or 8 topics we wanted to discuss, but we didn't get to. Next time, I think I'll bring back Robin for a one-on-one, maybe a midweek special, over 4 weeks, and let him go. Just ask him one question, sit back and let him go for it. He's got it all there. But next week, folks, we don't quite know what's going on. It's National Assembly next week in Perth. Yours truly here with my, you like it, folks, my Through Scottish Prism polo shirt, and if you like, my mannequin here at my side with the T-shirt. Available next week at the National Assembly, as we will be. We're going there. We're having and baseball hats, pens. Look at this brilliant pen, Prism pen, and there'll be mugs too. Not just these mugs, but real mugs, coffee mugs. And we're going to be in Perth. We're going to have a Prism there. We're just working on the technical details. We're not sure if our techie can make it, so we're trying to work a few things and get a PA system. Anyone out there with a good PA system we can bring with them, that would help us. And so we'll be doing that next week from Perth. And if I can make it all the way from here in Catalonia, I can't say sunny Spain because it's not today. You can make it. The more people that turn up, the better. And it proves that there's an audience for this, ladies, that we're oversubscribed and we've had to take a bigger venue. And I hear that's nearly getting to oversubscribed. Fabulous news that the people are getting ready to march.
And it's not all Alpa people either.
Oh, no, it's open to the public.
This is the refreshing thing. It's people who want independence.
Yep. And this is what the SNP should be doing. This is what everyone should be. This is what all the political parties, all the yes movement should do, is going to the public and give them hope.
SNP people are coming to.
Yes, there are. There's a lot of them been invited. How many turn up will be interesting to see. That would be the interesting thing. So anyway, we're way over our time, and these people are going to get to their Sunday dinner. Ladies, I shall see you next week.
See you next week.
Bright-eyed and bushy-tailed.
In the meantime.
Yeah.
I
don't mean to say that. We'll probably do a review programme at the end of the year, but my favourite comments so far this year, and I don't want to hear it again, was the lady came up to me at Hampden and said, "Oh, I love your Prism shows." She says, "But I've got to tell you, you look better in Prism than you do in real life." I'm still trying to recover from that one. But until next week, till we see you all again, I hope you've enjoyed this, and we'll see you then. Till then, take care.
Okay, see you
Through a
next.
Scottish Prism, the programme that is unapologetically pro-Scottish independence and anti-Westminster rule. Everything we say here is viewed through a Scottish prism. Brought to you by Barhead Boy.